So to kick things off,
Yep.
let's just pretend that we don't know each other, we haven't
Okay.
met.
Yep.
Would you mind doing a brief introduction around who you are and your role here at 19 Group?
Okay, so role here at 19 Group, so I'm a group CEO. Who I am, so Peter Jones, not the real one, before any listeners get excited. So I've got about 25-year background in trade exhibitions, and then before that about 5 years in publishing. The 19 Group, as it stands today, is private equity backed. We were bought by Phoenix Equity Partners back in 2018, and have started growing the group since 2019. And despite COVID, in fact, I think COVID has probably galvanised the event sector, Tom. Despite COVID, the group has had significant growth, and as of today, we stand at 103.5 people.
Amazing. What an achievement as well. And I guess it's probably quite tricky to slim it down into a short summary, but how were those COVID years? I know it's something we like to forget about, but It's an incredible story. As I know, when I came in to your monthly meeting, you were discussing the progression of the business, and it looks like you guys are stronger than ever. How is that possible, and how have you managed to achieve that throughout those tricky years?
It's in a way they're kind of like days of COVID, the ones we never want to kind of relive ever again, really. But I say this in a measured way, so purely commercially. I think COVID is the best thing that could have ever happened to the event sector. So a few months into COVID, so we went into the pandemic, being fortunate enough to at least have had a year of trading, with our private equity investors, Phoenix Equity Partners. It's been amazing. But at least to see us running some shows, so they could see we were capable of running really good shows. Then the pandemic hit, and about 3 months time into the pandemic, I remember being advised by people around me, not Phoenix, but others very close to the sector, that look guys, you've done a great job. You had an amazing lead into the pandemic. Nobody could have seen this coming. This is not your fault. But 19 Group would probably be likely just wound up. Because once we realised this pandemic was not going away in the next few months, as we'd all hoped, and we're probably in this for the long haul, a year, 2 years, that Patrick Vallance said, 5 to 10 years to get a vaccine. Yeah. We realised we'd gone from hero to zero. So we've gone from the coolest, imaginable sector of, tens of thousands of people in, tight halls doing business, to suddenly that's really uncool. So a few months in, I remember taking a call. I was advised, look, you're probably going to get closed, but just at least take from this. You did a great job on the run-up to the pandemic. And those are some really, really dark days. And then what happened after that, I think, is just one of the most incredible journeys, where we believe COVID galvanised the event sector. And we went into COVID with 22 people and 7 shows. And we came out of COVID with over 100 people and 17 shows. So it's been very good for the event sector.
Amazing! What an achievement, and what a positive story to come out of a tricky time. But, it's just amazing to see. So I guess if we dive into a little bit around your journey up until this point, can you take us back a little bit to where it all started, a younger version of yourself in terms of kind of your first job, and whatever that might have been, and then how that translated into the journey that you've been on up until today, because I know that a lot of people will be super interested in that.
I got my first job, I wouldn't endorse this, but just lied my way into my first job. So I left school at 15 and no real career prospects, went into sales. So I worked at Apple, selling the very first notebooks when they were these big black and white things that lasted about 10 minutes on a charge. Told them I was 17, I was actually 15. So I worked there for a while, and then went into publishing, spent 3 or 4 years in publishing. So I was the ad manager of Motorcycle News.
Nice.
When I was 20, and then at 21 then got into trade exhibitions. So I spent a journey working for some of the bigger companies. So Phil Saw, our chairman, he just left Blenheim Exhibitions way back then, 25 years ago. Just sold it, started working for them, did a few years there, went on to Tarsus Group, which is still around today. And then about 20 years ago, Tom, I realised that as building these great big major scale exhibitions, for others, and just thought, could I do that for myself? So 20 years ago, I set up our very first business, did so then with a business partner. And then over those 20 years, I've actually launched, built and sold 4 times. The first show we sold was a chocolate manufacturing expo, and went on to sell Counter-Terror Expo to Clarion. We launched CCR Expo, which is the cosmetic surgery show, sold that to Easy Fairs in 2016. And then we got to a point about 5 years ago where I was running a show called International Security Expo, which is going really well. And then the usual, you know, we were approached by lots of trade buyers, and I just got to a point in my life where, for once in my life, I didn't need to sell financially to get out of trouble. And I got to an age where I didn't necessarily want to start all over again, you know, the half dozen of us, the dirty half dozen, you know, from a shed and start a new sector. Didn't necessarily want to go, you know, and take a job working for someone else at that point.
Yep.
And that's when my chairman, Phil Saw, said, have you thought about private equity? Which had never occurred to me. But he sold the dream. He says it basically gives a lot of capital behind you, for once not my own capital, and to build a business, to remain entrepreneurial, very dynamic, very agile, but with somebody else's capital behind you to scale more quickly. And that's certainly come to fruition. We love what we do.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. What a story. And what a journey as well. And, you know, some really interesting highlights in there and stuff as well. But yeah, inspiring. I guess one of the points that I was going to mention on that, if other young people are really keen to get into the world of publishing, the world of events, what recommendation would you give them? Is it drop out of school at 15?
No,
not drop out, but you know, is it really interesting to saying about starting sales as well, because some of the things that we notice around the events industry is the ability to be really nimble, think on your feet, agile, all of these things, which I can see through some of those things. There would have been some key learnings, but obviously there isn't a one size fits all. Are there any tips that you would give for people that are looking to get started in the industry?
I've been asked before in various conferences, what does it take to make an entrepreneur? And I said jokingly, I probably shouldn't, but I think you've got to be a little bit stupid. If you were clever enough to actually analyse the risk, you'd never do it, because 80% of businesses fail in the first year, 80% of that 20% fail in year 2. When I first set up 20 years ago, I failed catastrophically. So I lost my, house and my flat and my car and the shirt off my back, lost the whole lot. We got wound up by the banks, and then went again. And I think I was never intelligent enough to properly calculate the risk. So I think my advice to any person thinking about giving it a go is just do it. Because if you overanalyze it, paralysis by analysis, I don't think you'd ever get started. It never makes sense to start your own business. So just give it a go. A bit like getting involved in a pub fight. Not that I've ever been in a pub fight, but if I ever was involved in a pub fight, I can imagine you just jump in and get going. Swing a few punches, grab a stool, push somebody against a freak machine. I don't know. And then once you're in it, so launches of businesses never go as planned. And even today, when we're launching new events at 19, we did last year with a Manufacturing and Engineering Week, that didn't go as planned. You just need to jump in, give it a go, and just listen. It's a bit like with my wife Vicky, just do a lot of listening and apologising. Nice. And eventually you'll work out a common ground. So not to overthink it too much.
Within that, you mentioned around the importance of failure. Is there anything that you've learned that has been incredibly useful in terms of dealing with failure? Talking about how you bounce back from those continuous setbacks. It sounds really inspiring, but with it, what kind of kept you going on to the next, and how did you manage to deal with those failures?
I think in business, and don't say it's the wrong way because you're in the digital world, I think social media's got a lot to answer for, because social media is like those pictures, people get a distorted view of what family life is like from Facebook. It's always the happy photos, it's always the celebrations, the wonderful, everyone's so happy, aren't they? And in the business world, we're on LinkedIn, and I've been guilty of this myself. It's always so great, we're winning these awards, look at our amazing team, look at this busy aisle. But sometimes, Tom, it's just shit, basically. And in order to get those winning moments, you need to go through a lot of fails to get there. So it's like when my dad taught me to ride a bike when I was 4. You know, he said, you're going to fall off and you're going to scrape your knee, stick a plaster on and get straight back in the seat, keep going. I think it's really important, and a big part of the culture of 19 is to help our people feel in a psychologically safe environment where they see fails as learning experiences. Because the only way we get to innovate is to fail. And we've all seen Jeff Bezos's rocket go into space. We saw, you know, Richard Branson fly around Virgin Galactic. Well, his first spacecraft crashed, killed the pilot. I think 5 or 6 of Jeff Bezos's rockets blew up on the launch pad. You don't see so much of that, but you have to fail in order to succeed. The biggest learning curve I've ever been through was that 20 years ago, that startup, the fail, lost a whole lot. And went again, and that was the biggest learning experience of my life, which I'd never do differently. And I would just encourage others going into business that probably expect you are going to fail, and it's okay, you'll find this where you'll learn.
Amazing. Very reassuring words, that, I think, that a lot of people, you know, at least it gives some comfort that you've got the inevitability of failure, but also that I guess it's integral to, you know, the long-term growth that you're looking for. So yeah, nice. And you touched on culture there, around the importance of culture. You know, as we discussed, I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of your team and, you know, come to the office and you know, observe this brilliant culture that you guys have built. And that's not genuinely not just something that I'm saying, it's something that couldn't be more important to us at MCM, something we work on.
I've seen that on your website. You guys are really great on culture.
I'm glad. It's really,
I've been really inspired by looking at what you do as well.
Good. Yeah. Well, hopefully we can share learnings and continue to grow together. But what has been key for your journey in terms of establishing this culture at 19 Group, which, as I say, feels really authentic? This isn't just from, you know, being at the exchange. You know, that was great to see, but this is also from speaking to various members of your team and hearing the chat in the office, and, you know, us walking around, and that you really get the feel for it. You know, how have you been able to cultivate that over the past couple of years?
Thank you, Tom. And it is actually, so these days when visitors come, we love to hear that. They walk around, you know, we've got 100 or so people out there, and there's culture is one of those things, it's hard to see or measure. It's what goes on beneath the surface. It's that the mood, the vibe you feel, the atmosphere walking around. And it is wonderful to see. Where that came from, if you'd have asked me 6-7 years ago, you know, Peter, talk to us about culture, I'd probably laughed and said that's something for a yogurt. We sell stands, we deliver visitors, we put buyers and sellers together, that's it, right, move on. And then that kind of works sometimes when it's a half dozen in a shed, and as a leader, you know, it's an autocratic leading style, and it's arms around those half dozen, right, come on gang, we're going over the top this way. And I realised when we got going 4 years ago, so our group managing director is Alison Jackson. She's been around in this sector probably even a little bit longer than me. Has led some very big businesses, was a managing director in EMAP. And I think it was Alison that first opened my eyes 4 years ago to culture. Because if we are to grow an organisation from, you know, a half dozen to these days 100, and this business will probably go on to, you know, 200, 400, 1,000 people, you do that through the people in the organisation. And it's the people in the organisation that have to have a framework where they're not looking to an autocratic leader, you know, for the cues or can I do this, can I do that. People in the organisation have to make decisions themselves. And culture is like a framework for us of how things get done around 19. So as long as people understand, you know, we've got 4 core values. So we're always kind, we're agile, we're driven, and we're inclusive. And within each of those 4 core values, like I've seen on your website, there's the behaviours that, you know, what we expect to see around 19, and the behaviours we don't expect to see. And as long as everyone understands that, then just go off and get on with it. And if you create an environment, which is why we spent quite a big investment on remodelling this HQ, is to create an environment where people feel it's a nice place to be, and people feel valued, and people feel they can trust themselves to jump on the bike, give it a go, and if they fall off, there is no retribution. There's nothing you can break at 19 we can't fix, and we'll only applaud you for having taken a risk, because that's innovation, right? You need to fail to innovate. So I think it was it was the acceptance that in order to lead an organisation that's going to grow to the North Star of where we're heading, have got to do things in a different way.
Amazing.
And it's enabled by culture.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so refreshing to see it, that it comes, with that structure, with that understanding of what's really important. I remember applying for internships at various advertising agencies, and being inquisitive around culture and stuff, and the response I often got around culture was, yeah, well, we've got a pool table and a beer fridge.
So gimmicks.
That's culture done, right?
Yeah.
And at the time thinking, there's got to be a bit more than that, surely, or what's the feeling, what's the understanding. So to see that structure and really get the feel that everyone's in it together and completely understanding where it is that you're going is inspiring.
I think everyone's probably got a tiny bit more in themselves. That in wherever you work in the organisation, whether you're a CEO or a marketing exec or an ops, everyone's got that little bit more they can bring. And I think something often, Tom, that holds people back is that fear of risk. Because if they take a risk, which is why, going back to earlier, starting your own business, that fear of failure, people think if they take a risk and it doesn't work, it's going to be, it's called out as retribution. And it's just, if you can just encourage each person to bring a more authentic version of themselves to their work and take a bit more of a risk, and you can get that working right and multiply that by 100 or 200, I think the output of that is limitless. And my CEO coach said to me once, stop focusing on the profits and the numbers. So when we first started 4 years ago, we are private equity backed, so it's all about, I thought it's all about revenue and profit. And it took me a long time to be brave enough myself and actually think, if we get the culture right and we get all of the people in 19 really singing, then the profit will look after itself.
Yep.
So when you came to the 19 exchange, we still show all the numbers because we want to be very inclusive, very open and transparent. So we show all the numbers for the group, but that's not the most important thing for us, because those numbers will look after themselves if the people here feel valued and they can give them true selves to their work.
Yep. Amazing. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but it's been an absolute pleasure.
Was that 20 minutes?
That was. I'm really conscious.
That seems like 4.
I didn't want to take you over 11 o'clock because I know you've got loads on. But that was our time. So
okay.
thank you so much.